When the dust cleared and the mask rolled across the ground, Jake's world went silent. The face beneath wasn't a warrior's, it was hers. If you love tales of the untamed frontier, saddle up and subscribe, because out here, every whisper of the wind carries a story worth hearing. The sun was dying slow over the New Mexico desert, painting the sky with the kind of fire that made a man think of heaven and hell at the same time. Jake Callahan rode with the brim of his hat low, his eyes narrowed against the light, and his hand never too far from the Colt on his hip. The trail had been long, too long, and his horse, Dusty, was breathing heavy through flared nostrils. He'd been chasing rumors for 6 days, rumors of a masked Apache rider who'd been cutting down ranchers from El Paso to Santa Fe. They said the warrior struck from the shadows, never left a body unmarked, and never missed a shot. Some said he wasn't even real, just a ghost the desert dreamed up to punish white men for stealing its land. Jake didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in revenge. The town of Dry Creek had been quiet that morning when he left, the kind of quiet that makes your skin itch. Sheriff Barnes had warned him not to go alone, said the Apache weren't like the outlaws Jake used to track. They didn't fight fair, didn't ride by rules. But Jake wasn't doing this for law or honor. He was doing it for Ben, his younger brother, found 2 weeks ago face down in the sand with a bullet between his eyes and an Apache mark carved into his chest. Now, with twilight sinking in and the sound of coyotes carrying on the wind, Jake felt the weight of that mark carved in his own memory. Every crunch of his horse's hooves sounded louder. The desert was too still. Then, snap. A branch cracked behind a ridge of red stone. Dusty snorted, nostrils flaring. Jake's hand dropped to his Colt, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Come on out," he called, voice steady, though the air felt like it was holding its breath. Silence. Then a faint glint, sunlight catching metal. Jake dove from the saddle just as a rifle shot split the air. The bullet tore through the leather strap of his saddlebag. Dusty bolted. Jake rolled behind a cactus, grit biting into his cheek. Another shot. He peeked around the rock. Nothing but shimmering heat and endless sand. Then movement, a shadow shifting on the ridge. Small, fast, deliberate. Jake squinted. "You're quick," he muttered under his breath, cocking the hammer. "Let's see how quick." He fired once. The bullet hit stone. The figure vanished. Then came the whistling, arrows slicing through the air. One grazed his arm, drawing a red line that burned like fire. Jake grunted, pressed a hand against the wound. "All right, you son of a..." Before he could finish, something slammed into him from the side. He hit the ground hard, his revolver spinning out of reach. Sand filled his mouth, his lungs, his eyes. A knee pressed against his chest, pinning him down. He swung, connected once, solid, but whoever was on him didn't flinch. The masked face hovered above him, painted with war colors, eyes burning through the slits. A blade caught the dying light, inches from his throat. Jake froze. The figure leaned close, so close he could feel the heat of breath through the mask. "You shouldn't have come here, cowboy," came a low, rasping voice, distorted by the mask. Jake grunted through gritted teeth. "Ain't leaving till I get what I came for." The blade pressed harder. "And what's that?" "Justice." The warrior hesitated, a flicker, small but real. In that heartbeat, Jake twisted, knocking the knife aside, rolling them both in the dirt. The two tumbled down the slope, crashing against rock and thorn until they hit the base, gasping. Jake scrambled for his revolver. The warrior lunged. He fired once, the shot grazing the mask. The second shot struck true, not deadly, but enough to knock them back. The warrior fell to the sand, clutching their shoulder. Jake stood, chest heaving, gun aimed steady. "Take it off. Mask, now." The warrior didn't move, just stared at him, breath ragged. I said take it off. His voice cracked across the desert like a whip. Slowly, trembling, the figure reached up, fingers brushing the edge of the mask. Jake's pulse hammered in his ears. The straps loosened, the mask slipped free, falling into the dirt. Jake's gun lowered an inch. It wasn't what he expected. The face beneath wasn't a hardened warrior, not the grizzled Apache fighter the rumors had painted. It was young. Too young. Wind-tossed black hair framed high cheekbones and eyes that held both fury and pain. And then Jake's heart stopped. He knew that face. "Lena," he whispered, voice barely a breath. Her lips parted, confusion flashing into recognition. "Jake?" The world seemed to fall silent. The desert wind, the creak of his saddle in the distance, everything disappeared. He took a step forward, the gun trembling in his grip. "I thought you were dead," she said bitterly, pressing her hand against the bleeding wound in her shoulder. "Yeah, so did everyone else." Jake swallowed hard. "How? Why the mask? The attacks? The killings?" She laughed, but it wasn't joy. It was the sound of something broken. "You think this is just revenge, Jake? You think it's that simple?" Before he could answer, another gunshot split the air. A bullet whizzed between them, kicking sand into his eyes. Jake spun, dropping low. "Who the hell?" Lena shouted, "Run!" But it was too late. 3 riders crested the ridge, men with rifles and dust-covered faces, wearing the same rancher coats Jake had seen in Dry Creek. One of them, tall and mean, spat tobacco into the dirt. "Well, I'll be damned," the man said. "Jake Callahan, out here making friends with the enemy." "Barnes?" Jake muttered. The sheriff grinned. "Didn't figure I'd find you this far out. Guess I got lucky." Lena staggered to her feet, blood running down her arm. "You brought them here," she said quietly. Jake shook his head. "No, I didn't." But Barnes raised his rifle. "Doesn't matter now. Orders are orders. Apache, outlaw, woman, it don't make no difference. The territory's got to be cleaned out." Lena's eyes hardened. "You lied to me," she whispered to Jake. "You always did." "Lena, no!" She dove for her fallen blade. The men opened fire. Jake lunged forward, returning shots, dust exploding around them. Horses screamed, bullets tore through the dry air. The ridge echoed with chaos. Jake grabbed Lena by the arm. "Come on!" he shouted. Together they sprinted toward the canyon's edge, ducking behind rocks as rounds chipped the stone around them. Barnes's voice roared across the distance. "You can't hide, Callahan! You ride with her, you die with her!" Jake reloaded, eyes wild. "We need horses," he muttered. Lena shook her head. "You don't get it! They'll never stop! They'll hunt me till there's nothing left!" "Then we make a stand." "Against Barnes? Against the whole damn town?" He looked at her, really looked. The woman he once loved, now painted as the enemy. The mask lying in the dust between them, half buried by the wind. "If it means finding out the truth," he said, "then yeah, I'll fight them all." Her gaze softened for just a moment, the faintest trace of the girl he'd once known flickering beneath the hardened shell. But then, another shout, closer this time. "They're flanking!" Jake cursed under his breath. "We move, now!" They darted down the ravine, feet kicking up dirt. Gunfire echoed from above. Lena stumbled once, but Jake caught her, pulling her behind cover. They pressed against the canyon wall, hearts pounding. "You still don't trust me, do you?" he asked, breathless. She looked at him, eyes fierce. "Trust died a long time ago, Jake." Then she turned and ran deeper into the shadows of the canyon, leaving him no choice but to follow her. Behind them, Sheriff Barnes and his men fanned out, their torches flickering like dying stars against the night. The desert wind carried the smell of gunpowder and blood, and as the last light faded from the sky, the sound of distant thunder began to roll, not from the heavens, but from hooves pounding hard across the earth. Jake didn't know yet if it was salvation or the end riding toward them, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't ready to lose her again. The night was bleeding fire when the riders found them. If stories of dust, blood, and unbroken spirit stir something in you, ride with us. Out here, every legend's born from the scars left in the sand. The desert wind screamed like a wounded animal as Jake and Lena ran through the ravine, their boots slamming against dry earth. The canyon walls loomed high and narrow, trapping every echo of their breath. Behind them, torches flickered like devils in pursuit, voices rising and fading between gunfire and shouts. The air stank of gunpowder and grit. "Keep moving!" Jake yelled, gripping Lena's arm as she stumbled over loose rock. Her wound had darkened her sleeve with blood, and she was pale beneath the war paint, but her eyes, those dark, fire-lit eyes, burned with the same fury that had once made him fall in love with her. A bullet struck the rock above, showering them with fragments. Jake cursed, dragging her behind a jagged ledge. The canyon opened slightly ahead, wide enough for horses, narrow enough for an ambush. "They're pushing us east," Lena gasped, clutching her shoulder. "That's the long way to the mesa. They'll corner us before dawn." He peeked out, saw the torches closing in. "Then we go west." She shook her head. "West is Apache ground." He reloaded the Colt with shaking hands. "Guess we'll find out if they still hate me." Lena gave him a look halfway between disbelief and a bitter smile. "You always were a damn fool, Jake Callahan." "Yeah, but I'm your fool." For a moment, the chaos faded. Just two people standing on the edge of a canyon, ghosts of their past flickering in their eyes. But then came the thunder, the real kind this time. Clouds rolling in from the north, swallowing the stars. Lightning flashed, illuminating the canyon walls and the figures moving across the ridges. "Move!" Jake shouted. They sprinted through the storm as rain began to fall, heavy and cold. Mud clung to their boots. The torches behind them sputtered, some dying in the downpour. It gave them cover, but not safety. When they reached the fork in the canyon, Lena hesitated. "If we go left, we hit the dry riverbed. It'll lead us to the old mission. And right?" Her jaw tightened. "Right takes us to Skull Mesa, Apache sacred ground." Jake glanced behind. Gunfire still echoed faintly, though the rain masked most of it. "We go right." "You don't understand," she said, voice trembling. "They'll kill us both." "Better them than Barnes." For a second, she almost laughed. "You haven't changed a damn bit." They turned right. The trail twisted upward, slick with rain and shadow. The higher they climbed, the colder it got. The wind howled through the cracks in the rocks, carrying whispers that didn't sound like wind at all. Songs, chants, fragments of memory that made Jake's skin crawl. When they finally reached the top, the storm had moved off into the distance. The mesa stretched before them, a vast plateau under a bruised sky. In the center stood a circle of stone pillars, blackened by fire and time. Lena stopped at the edge, her face drawn tight. "No one's supposed to come here," she said softly. "Not even me." Jake turned, breath heavy. "Then why bring me?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to one of the stones,
running her fingers over carvings so worn they barely showed. "Because you need to know the truth about your brother, about me." Jake's stomach turned cold. "What are you talking about?" She faced him, rain still dripping from her hair. "Your brother, Ben, he wasn't killed by Apaches, Jake. He was killed because of them." "What the hell does that mean?" "He found out what Barnes was doing. He found out Dry Creek wasn't defending against raids. They were staging them, dressing their own men as Apaches, attacking settlers and blaming the tribes to start a war. Barnes gets the land, the railroad gets the right of way, and the blood, well, that's just part of the deal." Jake's head spun through the memory. Ben's body, the mark carved into his chest, the cold fury that had driven him here. "You're saying Barnes? Barnes killed him?" She nodded. "And made it look like we did." Jake's mind spun through the memory. Ben's body, the mark carved into his chest, the cold fury that had driven him here. "You were there that day," he whispered.
"I tried to save him," she said quietly, "but I was too late. They burned the village after that, called it justice. That's when I put on the mask." Jake's hands trembled. The storm had passed, but thunder still rolled inside him. "You've been hunting them ever since." Lena didn't deny it. She turned away, eyes distant. "Every bullet I fired was for someone they buried in the sand." He wanted to be angry, to scream, to curse, to drag the truth back into the dark, but all he felt was the crushing weight of guilt. All those years, he'd been chasing the wrong enemy. "I should have known," he said softly. "I should have seen it."
Lena looked at him. "You couldn't. You were blinded by the same lies everyone else was, but now you know." He nodded slowly, the fire of vengeance in his chest changing shape, turning colder, sharper. "Then we finish this." "Barnes won't stop," she warned. "He's not just a sheriff. He's got the governor, the army, the ranchers. They'll all come." Jake holstered his gun. "Then we make 'em listen." Before she could answer, a crack split the night. A bullet hit the stone between them, sending shards flying. Jake ducked, drawing fast. Lena rolled behind another pillar. More shots followed, echoing off the canyon walls. "Guess they followed us after all," Jake muttered. Lena's voice came sharp through the dark. "We can't fight 'em here. We'll be trapped." "Then we don't fight. We lure 'em." The two exchanged a look that needed no words. Jake fired once toward the ridge, a flare of light in the night, while Lena darted to the side, circling the shadows. The gunfire drew the men down, step by step, into the circle of stones. Lightning flashed again, brief, violent, blinding. When the next shot rang out, Barnes' voice followed. "You can't hide forever, Callahan. That woman's poison. You don't even know what she is."
Jake's voice echoed back. "I know enough." Barnes laughed. "You think you can take on the whole damn territory for her?" Jake rose from behind cover, rain dripping from his hat brim. "I ain't doing it for her. I'm doing it for Ben." The pause that followed was like a blade drawn slow from its sheath. Then Barnes stepped forward, rifle aimed steady.
So you know. Yeah, I know everything. Then I guess there's nothing left to talk about. The two men stood facing each other across the storm-soaked mesa, guns gleaming under the flash of lightning. The air crackled, time itself holding its breath. And then, a scream. Lena burst from the shadows, driving a knife into one of Barnes's men. Another fired, hitting her in the side. Jake shouted her name, firing twice, dropping the gunman where he stood. Barnes raised his rifle, but Jake dove, rolling through the mud, firing blind. The bullet caught Barnes's shoulder, spinning him back. Thunder boomed. The storm came alive again. Jake crawled to Lena, her blood mixing with the rain. "Stay with me," he said, voice breaking. She gritted her teeth, hand clutching his coat. "You always were too late," she gasped, a weak smile flickering across her lips. "No, not this time." He tore a strip from his shirt, pressing it against the wound. "You're going to make it, you hear me?" She coughed, the sound wet. "If I don't, you tell them the truth. You tell them who started this war." He shook his head violently. "You're telling them yourself." The wind howled again, and Jake looked up. Barnes was gone. Only the rain and the echoes of the fight remained. "He ran," Jake said, fury boiling in his chest. "Coward ran." Lena's eyes fluttered. "Then chase him. Finish it." Jake looked down at her, torn between vengeance and the woman bleeding in his arms. "I'm not leaving you." She smiled faintly. "You already did once." He froze, the words cutting deep. Before he could answer, thunder rolled again, but this time it wasn't thunder. Hooves, dozens of them, coming fast. Lena's eyes widened. Apache riders. Jake turned toward the ridge, and sure enough, a line of riders appeared, faces painted, torches blazing. The storm's light caught the silver of their rifles. He raised his hands, stepping in front of Lena. "Don't shoot! She's one of you!" But the riders didn't slow. Their leader, an older man draped in wolf fur, shouted something in Apache. The wind swallowed it, but Jake saw the fury in his eyes. Lena tried to sit up, voice weak. "Tell them! I fought for them!" Jake knelt beside her, heart pounding as the riders closed in. He could feel the ground tremble beneath their charge. "Lena, hold on," he said. "Please!" She reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek, a ghost of a smile crossing her lips. "It's not the end, Jake. Not yet." Then her hand fell away. The riders surrounded them, torches burning bright against the rain. Jake didn't move. He didn't breathe. He just stared at the mask lying in the mud between them. The same mask that had started it all. When the leader dismounted, he spoke low and sharp in Apache. Jake didn't understand the words, but he understood the gesture, the rifle aimed straight at his heart. And as lightning ripped across the sky once more, Jake Callahan realized this fight wasn't over. It had just changed sides. When the dawn came, the desert smelled of gunpowder and ghosts. If your heart still rides with those who stand their ground, don't stray far. The West remembers every soul that dared to fight its silence. The rain had passed, leaving the mesa slick and red under the first light of morning. Jake Callahan knelt in the mud, hands bound behind him, face streaked with blood and grit. Around him stood a circle of Apache riders, solemn, unmoving, eyes sharp as blades. Their horses snorted, restless in the chill. The masks still lay in the dirt between them, the war paint smudged and fading. Lena lay a few feet away, her breathing shallow but steady. Someone had bandaged her wound roughly, tied it with a strip of cloth torn from her own tunic. Jake's heart twisted every time her chest hitched. The Apache leader, a man with hair silvered by years and a scar that ran the length of his jaw, stepped closer. He studied Jake for a long moment, then pointed at him with the end of his rifle. "White man, bring death," he said in broken English. Jake lifted his head, jaw clenched. "Wasn't me." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Always white man say this." Jake glanced toward Lena. "She's not your enemy. Neither am I." The leader said something sharp in Apache, and two of his men dismounted, dragging Jake to his feet. One shoved him forward toward the edge of the mesa. Below, the desert stretched endless and gold, quiet as a graveyard. "Sheriff Barnes," Jake said quickly, breath ragged. "He's the one who killed your people. He made it look like it was you." The leader's eyes flashed, but he didn't speak. Lena stirred, her voice hoarse but clear. "Chaska, let him speak." The leader turned sharply, the hard edge in his eyes softening as he looked at her. "You should not be here, Lena. You are one of us, but you wear their skin." She tried to sit up. "And because I did, I learned what they planned. Barnes will bring soldiers. He'll burn what's left of your land to build his railroad." Chaska's gaze flicked between her and Jake. "Why should we trust him?" Jake took a step forward, his wrists still bound. "Because I was blind, same as the rest. I hunted the wrong people. My brother died for trying to stop him. I ain't letting him win again." For a long moment no one moved. The only sound was the wind whispering over the stones. Then Chaska lowered his rifle. He said something in Apache, and one of the younger riders stepped forward, cutting Jake's ropes. Jake rubbed his wrists, staring at the older man. "Thank you." Chaska didn't respond. Instead, he turned to Lena. "You brought him here. His fight is yours now. But when the sun sets, if he lies, I end both of you." Lena nodded faintly. "Fair enough." By noon, the Apache camp stirred with life, smoke rising from fires, the smell of roasted corn and damp earth filling the air. Jake watched as the women tended to the wounded, children peering at him with wary curiosity. He'd never seen this side before. Not the warriors on horseback or the whispered stories of savagery the townsfolk liked to tell. These were families, lives, people trying to hold on to what little they had left. He sat beside Lena near the fire, watching her as she sipped from a tin cup. Her face was pale, but the firelight brought back a trace of her strength. "You should be resting," he said quietly. She gave a small, tired laugh. "You never stop worrying, do you?" "Not about you." Her smile faded. "You shouldn't have come back for me." Couldn't do anything else. He stared into the flames, jaw tight. "We need to stop Barnes before he rides out here. He won't stop till this whole camp's buried." Lena looked at him, eyes dark. "You'd fight your own people?" Jake didn't hesitate. "They ain't my people no more." She studied him for a long moment. "Then you're one of us now." The words hung in the air, heavy with everything they'd lost, and everything still ahead. By dusk, Chaska gathered his warriors. Barnes and his men would be coming at first light, leading soldiers and hired guns. The Apache had rifles, but few bullets. Jake knew a straight fight would be suicide. He drew a rough map in the dirt with a stick. "Barnes will come from the west ridge. He'll expect you to run east toward the canyon. That's where he'll have his shooters waiting." Chaska knelt beside him, watching. "You know this land?" "Well enough," Jake said. "There's a dry wash down here. If we lead 'em into it, Cut the ridge from both sides. We can trap 'em in their own choke point." Chaska nodded slowly. "You fight like Apache. Guess I've been learning from the best." Night fell heavy and silent. The fires burned low. Jake sat alone for a while, cleaning his Colt, watching the sparks rise into the dark. His mind drifted back to Dry Creek, the saloon laughter, the smell of whiskey and dust, the way everyone used to tip their hats when Barnes walked by. How could he have been so blind? Lena limped over, settling beside him. The moonlight caught her face, softening the hard lines that war had carved. "You really think we can win?" she asked quietly. He holstered the gun. "Don't know if we can win, but we can sure as hell make 'em remember us." She smiled faintly. "That's enough." They sat in silence, side by side, until the first light of dawn crept over the desert. The attack came fast. Barnes's column rode hard from the west ridge, soldiers in gray dusters, rifles gleaming. The air filled with the thunder of hooves. The first shots cracked like lightning, bullets whistling through the morning haze. Jake and Chaska's men waited until the horses hit the wash, then unleashed hell. The ambush was pure chaos, gunfire echoing through the canyon, smoke and dust twisting in the rising sun. Horses screamed, men shouted, rifles cracked. Jake moved like a man possessed, firing from behind rocks, each shot burning with the memory of Ben's blood. He saw Barnes near the ridge, barking orders, his face twisted with rage. Jake broke from cover, sprinting across open ground as bullets kicked sand around him. Barnes saw him coming. Their eyes locked, two men bound by betrayal, by ghosts. "You should have stayed out of this, Callahan," Barnes shouted, raising his rifle. Jake fired first. The bullet slammed into Barnes's shoulder, spinning him sideways. The sheriff staggered, but didn't fall. He raised his gun, firing back. The round tore into Jake's side. Pain flared white hot, but he kept walking, each step fueled by something deeper than anger. Barnes fell to his knees, coughing, bleeding. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he spat. Jake stood over him, breathing hard. "No," he said softly. "Just done being your fool." He pulled the trigger. The echo rolled across the desert like thunder, fading into silence. When it was over, the soldiers had scattered. The survivors fled into the dust, leaving behind the wounded and the dead. The Apache stood victorious, but not unscarred. Jake collapsed beside a rock, hand pressed to his wound. The world swayed. Lena appeared, falling to her knees beside him, her face streaked with dirt and tears. "Jake, stay with me!" He managed a faint grin. "Told you I wasn't leaving you again?" She pressed her hands over the bleeding, shaking her head. "You can't die now, not after all this." "Maybe the West finally gets its peace," he murmured. She leaned close, tears hitting his skin. "You can't die, Jake." He looked at her one last time, the sunrise painting her hair in gold. "Reckon I already did once," he whispered. Then his eyes closed. For a long time, the desert held its breath. Lena pressed her forehead against his, silent, the sound of the wind carrying away every word she didn't say. When the Apache buried him, they did it on the edge of the mesa, facing east so he'd see every sunrise that came after. Chaska said a prayer in his language, one that spoke of warriors finding their road home. Lena placed the mask beside the grave, half covered in sand. Then she mounted her horse, staring out at the horizon where the land met the sky. The wind rose again, warm and steady, carrying the faintest echo of his voice. "Ain't leavin' till I get what I came for." She smiled through the tears. "Then I'll ride a little farther for you, Jake Callahan." And as she rode into the burning sunrise, the desert swallowed her shape. Another story lost to the dust, another legend written in blood and silence. The West never forgets.